Hi, so we're going to use the template for how to make a mock-up for your record. So this video is for if you chose to do a record album cover. If you chose to do a CD album cover, look for the next video. Okay, so basically on your template, I've given you a few different layers over here, right? So if I turn some of these layers off, you can see this is the original picture. This original picture has a photo of a Billie Eilish album, but we want to make it a mock-up of our own album cover that we created. So the first thing that I have on here is just a shape that covers Billie Eilish so that it's a blank color. I also have a layer here that's labeled album artwork goes here. So that's where you're going to be inserting the artwork that you created. We also will need to insert an album texture so that it looks like it's a sleeve that an album would go inside of. So again, it says album texture goes here. I also up here covered the paper that's attached to the actual album with a blank color as well. And then on top of that, it says record artwork goes here. So the artwork that would go on that little paper section in the center of the album, that is where you would put that artwork, is this very topmost layer. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to select the layer that says album artwork goes here. And then I just have like an image that I found off the internet that I am going to use as my example. But you guys are going to use the artwork that you create in either Photoshop or Illustrator in order to do this step. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this image that I want to put onto my record sleeve. I'm going to select the entire image. So I'm going to do Control A and then Control C to copy. And then I'm going to come back over here to my template. Again, making sure that I have my album artwork goes here layer selected. And then I am not going to just paste it in there and try to fit it onto the square. Instead, I'm going to use a filter that helps with making things look like they fit on the perspective that they're supposed to. So I'm going to come up here to filter and then vanishing point. So again, that was filter, vanishing point. And then you're going to get a box that looks like this. We are going to use this tool, this create plane tool, to select the area that the record is in. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. So basically, I'm going to make a little box. And I'm going to try to click on the edges of my record. And you can see that after I make that box, it has a grid, right, that shows you the direction that the perspective is going. Now, I didn't do it quite perfectly. So what I need to do is I'm going to use the Edit Plane tool to move the white squares on that grid to make sure that it lines up as good as I can get it. So I'm going to zoom in by holding Control and the space bar on my keyboard. So again, that was Control space bar, and now it looks like a little magnifying glass, and I can zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to use that mouse to line up the blue edges of my plane with the black edges of the record. And then if you need to move down, you can hold the space bar, and then your mouse turns into that little hand. And then you can click and drag to move. And so then now that my plane is all lined up here, I'm going to zoom back out so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to do Control and then minus on your keyboard, Control minus, and that will zoom out. Okay, so after I have my plane created, remember we copied our artwork previously, and so now I need to paste that artwork into this filter. So I'm gonna do Control V, and then my artwork's gonna show up over here. And with the mouse the way that it is, all I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag that artwork onto the plane, and then it automatically goes into perspective. So now what I need to do is I need to resize it so that it fits on the record. So I'm going to do Control T for transform. And right now we do have to make sure that we hold the shift key so that our proportions don't get wonky. So I'm gonna hold shift and resize this so that it fits on my record. Something like that, right? And then once you have it where it's covering the entire record, then you're gonna press enter to save it. And now your record looks like it's almost the album cover. So it is in the correct perspective, but there's still a few things that we need to do to make it look more believable. Okay, so the first thing is the record actually goes underneath the speaker. And so I need to zoom in there so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm gonna put a mask on the album artwork goes here layer. So I'm gonna click on the mask. And then I'm going to paint with my brush tool with black to get rid of this corner. Now, what I also want to do is make sure I don't get rid of too much of it. So I erased enough where I could see where it's supposed to go. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back with my polygon lasso tool here. And I'm going to make a really crisp line where the record is supposed to stop. And I'm going to paint with white to bring that guide back. So now my record looks like it's going underneath the speaker, which is perfect. However, now I need to add a texture on top of it because it doesn't look like a record. It just looks like an artwork that's kind of got weird perspective on it. It doesn't look or have the texture that a record sleeve would have. So we're going to add that texture on top. So I also gave you guys a file that has the record texture ready for you. So go ahead and open that file. So when you open that file, it's labeled vinyl texture. You're going to notice that I gave you the original picture that has a whole record on it. I also gave you a layer that is just the sleeve itself without anything else around it. And that's the layer that we want to copy. Okay, so all I'm going to do is the same thing that I did with the album artwork. So I'm going to go ahead and Control A to select everything on that layer, and then Control C to copy what's on that layer. And then I'm going to go back to my template and I'm going to click on the layer that says album texture goes here. And then I'm going to go back into my filter for the vanishing point. And you can see that the grid is still there. And then what I want to do is I want to add that texture on top of my artwork. So I'm going to do Control V to paste. I'm going to drag it into perspective. And then I'm going to do Control T to transform. And I'm going to hold Shift so that my proportions don't get messed up. And we're basically just doing the same thing that we did with our artwork. We're trying to make sure that this picture that has the texture that we want is in the correct perspective. So now that it's on top of there, I'm going to again go ahead and press enter. And then because I went on the new layer that says album texture goes here, I did not get rid of my artwork. I just covered it up, right? So now what I need to do is I need to make that texture see-through so that I can see my artwork. So first thing to do that is I'm going to change the blend mode to screen. And then I'm also going to give it an adjustment layer of levels. And we're going to adjust these levels, but first we're going to clip it to the texture layer. So that I held Alt and I clicked in between those two layers to make a clipping mask, right? So I'm going to clip it so that it just affects the album texture. And then I'm going to adjust those levels so that only the shadows are showing. So all of that white is going to kind of disappear. And now it looks like the texture that was on that photo is on top of our artwork, which is exactly what we want. However, if I zoom in over here, you can see that we still have part of it going over the speaker again, right? So if I click on the album texture and I give it a mask, then I can paint with black and get rid of the texture that's going on top of our speaker. Okay, so now we have successfully made our artwork look like it's on an album that's sitting on the table. Looks good. So that means the next thing that we have to do is put some artwork on the record. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to go where it says record art goes here, and we're going to click on that layer. And then I'm going to go find my artwork that is supposed to go on the actual record. And what I did for this is I just cut out the circle that has the planet on it from the artwork that I'm using. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to do Control A to select everything on that layer, and then Control C to copy it. And then make sure you're on the correct layer on your template. So you're going to go record art goes here, click on that layer at the very top. And we're going to come up to the top here and do filter and then vanishing point again. And then what we want to do is we want to add a new plane that's going to exist on our record. So I'm going to go with my create plane, and I'm going to make a box that's going to go around the circle. And then I also want to move the squares of this box to make it look like the lines in my grid match potentially what angle the record is at on my screen, right? So I don't want it to look like it's too like close together like this. That doesn't make any sense, right? But I do want it to look like it's going to be sitting on top of this surface. So I think something kind of like this would be good. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did with our artwork that was for the sleeve. And we're going to do Control V to paste. And then we're going to click and drag this guy so that he's on top of the record. And we're also going to do Control T so that we can resize it to make sure that it fits on that circle. So you can see I've done a pretty good job here of the grid that I created, because when I changed the size of my circle, it like almost perfectly covered that circle, right? So if I hold shift right now and I make this smaller, you can see here's the circle around the outside. And I just want to make sure that it covers that whole circle. Okay, and then again, we're going to press enter. And then now we have a new problem where we need to be able to see the center part of the part that holds the record, right? That little metal part that pokes through the record that holds it. We need to be able to see that, right? So what I'm going to do with this layer turned off for now is I'm going to select the very bottom-most layer, layer 0. And I'm going to try to use my quick selection tool to select that little metal bit, right? Okay, and with that little metal part selected, now I'm going to go back to my record artwork. I'm gonna turn that guy back on. And then I'm going to invert my selection. So I'm gonna do Control Shift I, and then I'm going to add a layer mask. And that layer mask will then automatically mask out the part that I did not have selected. And now you can see the little metal bit poking through, right? Super cool. So I know you might be thinking that we're done. You're like, look, the artwork is on the record, the artwork is on the sleeve, it's finished. However, what if you wanted to change the color of the record, right? Because right now this record is a really bright orange. And that bright orange might not work with your artwork, right? Specifically on mine, this like orange that's in the planet, it doesn't vibe, it doesn't mesh well with this bright orange record. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to go to my layer 0. I'm going to use my quick selection tool, and I am going to try to select all of my record. I want to select everything that's orange. And when I do that, that includes all of this orange stuff that's in the reflection. Because if you change the color of this record and you don't change the color of this reflection, then it's going to look just super weird, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fix that up. So remember, you could also use the select and mask option. So if you're having a hard time getting good edges over here on this reflection part, you can click on select and mask. And we can use this refine edge tool to help us get a better, more smooth selection on this orange bit here. Okay, so now that I've used my refine edge tool to get a better selection on everything that's the orange record, I'm going to press OK. And then I want to make an adjustment layer. So I'm going to click back at the top up here, and I'm going to add an adjustment layer for hue and saturation. And when I do that, the hue and saturation adjustment layer is going to automatically only select the parts that I had selected from our selected mask, right? So if you look at this mask over here, you can see that the only white bits that are there are the parts that are going to affect the orange record. So now if I change the color of this, oh my gosh, so cool, I can change the color of the record, right? However, let's say I wanted one that was like this bluish tone here, and I don't like that it kind of gets rid of some of the texture on the record, right? So if I do that same selection, then I can, with that same selection, I can go and add another adjustment, but I'm going to put this adjustment above my original photo, and I'm going to make that layer adjustment for levels. And I'm going to try to really push these levels so that the shadows stand out more. And then now if I change that hue and saturation layer, you can always see the grooves in the record, right? So basically what I'm trying to point out to you guys is that there are many steps in Photoshop to make something look convincing, okay? So these are the steps that you need to take in order to make a mock-up of your record design. So after you make the flat version where you just have all of the artwork visible, you're also going to make this mock-up where you can show what it would look like if somebody actually physically had your record. Okay, so you're going to follow all of these same steps with your artwork, and I can't wait to see it. Good luck.